This is the Harry Loomis Show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Harry Loomis Show. Today is Monday, August 5th, and we are in the home stretch of the Olympic break for NASCAR. We're going back racing this weekend. The Trucks and the Cup Series will be in Richmond this weekend. And this week we're going to preview both races. Usually after the Cup recap, I pretty much only preview the Cup race. But since we don't have a race to recap, we'll take a little bit of extra time and talk about the Truck Series as well. The Truck Series has been going back to Richmond since 2020. Of the four winners in the four races, only Grant Enfinger, the 2020 winner, will be in the race this week. 2021, John Hunter Nemechek won. He's in the Cup Series now. 2022 is Chandler Smith. He's in Xfinity. Last year, it was Carson Hocevar, who was also in the Cup Series. So fairly clean slate. But last year, you can make the argument that the race should have gone to Ty Majeski. Majeski obviously is a short track ace. We know coming up from Wisconsin, all the snowball derbies and races that he's won like that. He has run really well here at Richmond in the past. 2022, start on the pole, finished third, led 73 laps in that race. That race was dominated by Chandler Smith at the end of the race, but early on, Majeski was giving him a run for his money. And last year, he dominated the race, led 168 of 250 laps. I think it was a pit road penalty, if I recall correctly, that cost him that win. But he made a hard charge back to second, but just didn't have enough time to catch Carson Hocevar. Majeski's got to be your favorite to win this race, but it's obviously not a given thing. Majeski is the most recent winner, having won at IRP, but you have to take into account guys like Christian Eckes and Corey Heim, who have been so good all year long, with this being the last race of the regular season as well. Eckes is in pretty good shape to lock up the regular season championship. Heim's going to need a little bit of luck, but wouldn't be surprised to see both of them maybe run some different strategies depending on how the race goes to try to get playoff points. Looking at the Truck Series playoff standings as we pull them up right here, a couple of drivers have already clinched their spot. Obviously, we know Corey Heim, Christian Eckes, Ty Majeski, Nick Sanchez, and Raja Carruth with their race wins will be in the playoffs. Tyler Ankrum and Grant Enfinger as well have locked their way in based on points. Right now, Taylor Gray has, by my mental math, a 43-point advantage over Tanner Gray for the last spot. But for the first driver out, that's Daniel Dye. He is 48 points ahead, so basically a full race as long as, disaster doesn't strike. As long as he doesn't finish last, basically, Taylor Gray should be making his first playoff appearance. But ninth on back, it gets a little bit tighter. Ben Rhodes, the defending champion, is in ninth. He's at 399 points. Daniel Dye at 377. So a 22-point gap for Rhodes. He's in good shape, but definitely not a sure thing by any means, especially given that Rhodes has only led 16 laps this year, only 2 top 5s, 5 top 10s. Definitely not indicative of what we've seen out of Rhodes the past couple years. But I think it's really going to come down to Tanner Gray and Daniel Dye. Tanner Gray has not made the playoffs in his career either. He has a 5-point advantage over Daniel Dye. So that's going to be a really interesting storyline to follow. Behind Dye, Stuart Friesen is in 12th. He is 16 points back. Matt Crafton's looking to continue his playoff streak. He is 43 points back. Friesen, Crafton, Chase Purdy, Dean Thompson, Lane Riggs, Jake Garcia, any of those guys behind Daniel Dye are more than likely going to have to win this race to be able to make the playoffs. I don't believe we've had a walk-off winner in this playoff era, someone that was outside the playoffs win their way in, at least in the Truck Series. Could have happened today, or could have happened this weekend, who knows. I don't believe it'll come to that. If I had to make a prediction, I like the way that Tricom, and BMR have been running, but I've been very impressed with Tanner Gray and Taylor Gray for that matter, their development so far this year. I think Tanner Gray is going to do exactly what he needs to do. Maybe he'll get some stage points early in the race, but he is going to put himself in a position to make the playoffs over Daniel Dye, which means the top 10 in the playoffs right now will be the top 10 that will be battling for a championship come Phoenix. And if I'm going to make a race pick, I'm going to go with Ty Majeski. Majeski comes on strong at this point of the year. He won 2 playoff races in 2022, one at IRP in the playoff opener in 2023. He's got the win Now in the regular season, can he get another win before the playoffs, give himself a clean at least 15 bonus points, because he's got 10 right now, 5 for winning a race, could win a stage as well, get up to 16, possibly 17 playoff points. I think Majeski is going to be the guy to beat this weekend. So it's going to be Majeski with 2 wins, Christian Eckes, probably the regular season championship with a 50-point lead with 3 wins, and Corey Heim with 5 wins. The thirds will also be one of the top seeds in the playoffs, and it's really going to be a battle for that last spot going into the playoffs. But I think that's how it shakes out. Ty Majeski will be the winner on Saturday. Now moving over to the Cup Series race. Obviously, this is the second race of the season at Richmond. The first one was run on Easter Sunday, and that race was dominated by Martin Truex Jr. Larson led a lot early. Truex took over in the second half of the race. Had it won up until late caution. Denny Hamlin wins the race off pit road and holds on to win the race. Denny Hamlin won, Joey Logano second, Kyle Larson third, Martin Truex fourth, Chase Elliott fifth. This week is going to be a little bit different. This is the first time in a points-paying race that NASCAR is going to have multiple tires for teams to choose from. They tried this in North Wilkesboro, and the problem with it is one set of tires was supposed to be softer and have more speed at the beginning of the run, but then wear out. And the other tire was supposed to be slower at the beginning of the run, but be more durable and last longer. We didn't see enough of a difference at North Wilkesboro for the tires to really become a factor. It also wasn't a long enough race, but I hope NASCAR's learned from their mistakes. Like I said, we don't need what we got at Bristol, which is absurd tire fall off. That's not a sustainable product for the Cup Series. I think that would be a mistake to just bank on that every time you come to a short track. But you definitely do need tire fall off. I think there's a happy medium to be found somewhere there. And I hope that Richmond, or in Goodyear particularly, have learned from their mistakes and are able to really make the different tires work. Now, looking at the last 5 races, Chris Buescher was the winner of this race last year, a race that Brad Keselowski dominated. Buescher took the lead late and won. But looking at the last 5 races here at Richmond, the best driver has easily been Denny Hamlin. He's got 2 wins, 4 top 5 finishes, led 135 laps. He really hasn't dominated any of these races, but he's always putting himself up front. The only race he didn't, 2023, the spring race, he got into it with J.J. Yaley early on, led 71 laps, but had an issue and fell back to 20th place. But other than that, 1st, 4th, 20th, 2nd, and 1st. Why 5 races? Those are the 5 races in the next-gen era. Pretty good sample size to see that Denny Hamlin, who we've always known is good at Richmond, is continuing to be one of the guys to beat. Kyle Larson got a win here in 2023 as well. Chris Buescher, the winner last year. The other race at Richmond in this era was won by Kevin Harvick, the second race of 2022. Obviously, he's retired, but he finished ahead of Christopher Bell, another driver that's really been coming on strong at the short tracks and just in general. He's got 2 top 5s and 4 top 10s in the 5 races here, but he had a good run going in the spring up until a speeding penalty. He looked like possibly a guy that could steal the win on the different strategy, but shooting yourself in the foot isn't going to get you very far. Brad Keselowski is another driver that could have a good run. Like I said, he had a great run going in this race a year ago. He's always run pretty well at Richmond. He's had a couple wins here in the past. I remember in 2014, I think he led 381 of 400 laps. He's really had some strong performances here in the past. This race, it feels like it could be a pretty good indication of who's going to be competitive coming into the playoffs. We have 2 road course races in the playoffs. Obviously, the Bristol night race in Martinsville, the penultimate race of the season. You want to make sure that you have your stuff right coming into these last 10 races that are coming up. You know, looking at the drivers that we've seen win this race recently, Chris Buescher made a strong run. He won 3 of the last 5 races heading into the playoffs, made it all the way to the round of 8. Kevin Harvick, he won this race and looked like he was going to be a championship threat, but then he had a disaster of a first round. You know, his car caught fire at Darlington. He wrecked early on in Kansas, didn't make it out of the first round. You could throw that one away. But, you know, Martin Truex won here and went on to the championship 4 in 2021. 2020, Brett Keselowski, same thing. 2019, Martin Truex, same thing. 2018, Kyle Busch, same thing. A lot of recent years, the driver that has won this race has gone on to have a really strong end of the season, aside from Kevin Harvick. Circumstances out of his control. So, with this being the first race in 2 weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what teams are able to kick the rust off more or less. We had a 2-week break in 2021 for the Olympics as well. Kyle Larson was the first winner at Watkins Glen after the break. No reason to believe he can't be competitive here as well. This race I could see going a couple different ways. I don't think we're going to see a driver get their first win of the year this week. I actually think that it's going to be a Joe Gibbs win, and it's going to be Denny Hamlin. Hamlin, like I said, he's always up front here, and he's coming off a rough stretch before the Olympic break. The finishes haven't been where Denny Hamlin wanted them, especially where they were at the first half of the season. I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for Hamlin to kind of get a clean slate, go back to the basics, and this is his favorite track. It's his home track. It's arguably his best track. I think he's really going to put a statement performance on, get his 4th win of the season to tie Kyle Larson for most wins in the Cup Series. So those are my picks for this weekend. Ty Majeski will win the truck race. Denny Hamlin will be the winner on Sunday. Not the boldest, but if it's right, it's right. So that's going to do it for the NASCAR portion of the Harry Loomis Show this week. Coming up, we're going to start ranking each division in the NHL one by one, and we're going to start off this week with the Metropolitan Division. Free agency was a month ago. It's in the rearview mirror now. We have a good idea of what these teams are going to look like. So we're going to go 1 through 8, guessing how the Metropolitan Division is going to finish based on how they're looking right now. We will be back in a bit on the Harry Loomis Show. We're back here on the Harry Loomis Show. This week, we are going to start ranking the divisions one by one based on how I expect them to perform so far this year. We'll probably reassess this by the time the regular season starts, give our final division predictions. But we're going to start today with how I'm seeing the Metropolitan Division. In years past, the Metropolitan Division had the argument for probably being the best division in the NHL. Last year, yes, you had the Hurricanes and the Rangers were arguably the 2 best teams in the league, at least in the regular season. But besides that, probably the worst division in the NHL. Really a top-heavy division, and there were some injuries for some teams that really dampened their season. But the Metropolitan was not what we expected, not what we've come to expect. Obviously, 2 of the teams that always made the Metropolitan so good, the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins, they are both aging and they're on the decline. Haven't really seen a lot of teams able to take their place so far. So how is this division shaking up as of right now? First off, last year, the division champion was the New York Rangers. As of right now, my number 1 team is still the New York Rangers. Looking at this team, really not much different from last year's team. Not a lot of offseason moves. The big one, pretty much the only move, was trading for Riley Smith from the Penguins. They gave up a 2nd and a 5th round pick. A bit of an overpay in my opinion, but I do like Riley Smith. He did great things with the Vegas Golden Knights. He should fit pretty well into that middle 6. But Artemi Panarin, you have 2 years left of him. His contract has been fantastic. He was borderline a Hart contender last year. Mika Zibanejad, I'm still a very big fan of his. Chris Kreider's on a good contract as well, 3 more years at $6.5 million. They've got really good depth. Vinny Trocheck is one of the most underrated players in the league. Alexis Lafreniere is one of the biggest pieces on this team. The former 1st overall pick did take a big step last year. You have to hope that the same is coming for Capo Caco. And on the back end, Adam Fox is one of the best defensemen in the NHL. There were talks about possibly trading Jacob Trouba, who's got 2 years left at $8 million. No deal yet. There was a report that he nixed the trade. He has that right with his no trade clause. We'll see how that continues to play out. And on the back end, Igor Shesterkin is probably the best goalie in the NHL. He had a really rough first half of the year. Jonathan Quick was really good for them, but then really turned it on in the second half and was spectacular in the playoffs. He really helped carry that team past Carolina. I thought Carolina at some points was outplaying the Rangers in the second round series, but Shesterkin was a brick wall in net. and that's the reason why the Rangers made it to the conference finals. And I think they're going to be the top seed in the Metro once again this year. Now, the second team I like in the Metropolitan Division, second place, I have the New Jersey Devils. And you want to talk about a team that had a cursed season last year. So many injuries on that team. Bad goaltending. Jack Hughes missed a lot of time. Jack Hughes is a top 10 player in the league when healthy. The problem was he really wasn't for them last year. A lot has changed with this team. Lindy Ruff is gone. They brought in Sheldon Keefe, who at the very least has gotten the most out of his teams in the regular season. You can say what you want about him and the Toronto Maple Leafs come playoff time, but they were always at least a 100-point team. He gets the most out of his team from October through April. Can he get them past over the hump in April? We'll figure that out once we get there. But this, on paper, is a very, very good team. Timo Meier has the best contract on the team at $8.8 million for another 4 years. For another multiple years. Excuse me, Puckpedia only goes for 4 years. I'm a big fan of Timo Meier. Like I said, Jack Hughes is one of the best players in the league as well. Jesper Bratt's a very underrated piece on that team as well. Nico Hischier is one of the best defensive forwards in the entire NHL. They've got great depth. They've got some forwards like Eric Hall on the bottom six, Andre Palat, that are really tough to play against. That's what you want in an up-and-coming team. On the back end, I like the addition of Brett Pesce. Him with Dougie Hamilton is a really formidable 1-2 combo on the right side. Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, there's a lot of promise on the back end for them as well. If they hit, this team could be really dangerous in the next couple of years. And what helps them now, goaltending has killed them in years past, and they're taking a shot to try to fix that. Jacob Markstrom, after all the speculation, has finally been traded to the Devils from the Calgary Flames. Him and Jake Allen, I actually really like that 1-2 combo. I think if things work the way they should have last year, the Devils will be back to right around a 110-point team. The upside for this team is that good. I don't see any reason, other than injuries, for this team not to hit this year. In third place, I think maybe the biggest faller of the truly great teams last year, team that maybe had the hardest offseason, is that it's going to struggle the most this year, is the Carolina Hurricanes. Make no mistake about it, the Hurricanes were a great team last year. I picked them to win the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the playoffs, but it feels like a lot of the wind has fallen out of their sails this offseason. The big loss, obviously, was Jake Gensel. There were talks about losing Martin Necas as well. He sounded like he was requesting a trade. They signed him to a bridge deal, 2 years, $6.5 million. Make no mistake about it, this is still a good team. Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Martin Necas is a very solid core to build around. Yes, Barry Kotkaniemi's contract, however, is still looking pretty rough. There were talks about a potential buyout this year. That hasn't happened. He's still on the team as of right now. On the back end, obviously, Brett Pesce was a big loss. I don't love the Dmitry Orlov contract. He's got one more year at $7.75 million. I do like some of the additions they made. I like Shane Gostisbehere. I was hoping he would stay in Detroit. He did really good things for them. Sean Walker, I think, is a really solid right-handed defenseman as well. Tony DeAngelo is off to the KHL as well. He's gone. On the back end, Freddie Anderson was not great last year, especially not in the playoffs. I was shocked they didn't go with Pyotr Kochetkov, who seems like the future in net. I hope he's able to take a step this year. I really like this team. They seem like they should be a contender on paper, but it seems like if all things go the way they should go, they've gotten leapfrogged by the Rangers and potentially by the New Jersey Devils. So a lot to prove for the Hurricanes this year. But, we remember the Washington Capitals in 2018. We thought that their last real shot was in 2017 because they were supposed to lose a bunch of players. They ended up signing guys like TJ Oshie to an 8-year deal. It's not a great contract now, but it worked out at the beginning. The next year, they win the Stanley Cup. Hockey timelines can be really weird like that. The door is not shut on the Hurricanes. They're going to make the dance, and who knows what happens when you get there. But right now, I think the momentum is definitely dying out a little bit for Carolina. In fourth, speaking of the Capitals, that is where I have them. They finished fourth in the division last year as well. And honestly, I don't know how this team made the playoffs. They had the worst goal differential of any team to ever make the playoffs, but they somehow made it there. They came on pretty strong at the end of the season, and then they got rocked by the Rangers in round one. Not a very memorable postseason experience, but they definitely did get better in the offseason. I like a lot of their moves that they made. They're really going for it. Andrew Mangiapane for a second-round pick, I think, is a pretty good deal. Also, I was shocked at the Jacob Chikrin deal, but they got that done as well from the Ottawa Senators. Matt Roy, 5 years, 5.75, could be a solid deal as well. So the Capitals obviously going for it. They want to keep this window open as long as they can. Everyone's always been saying. Also, they got Logan Thompson as well. I forgot to mention that. They got Logan Thompson from the Golden Knights. But everyone's been saying as soon as Ovi falls off and he's done, the Capitals are going to crater. They're trying to keep this window open as long as they can. Pierre-Luc Dubois from the Kings as well. If that works, great. You're a genius. You get PLD to work. If it doesn't, you've got him at $8.5 million for the next 7 years, and that's an anchor. That is really a make or break deal. They're gambling that. They gave up Darcy Kemper for this player. We'll see what happens there. I don't love Tom Wilson's contract at all. $6.5 million until 2031. This team by no means is a cup contender. TJ Oshie is on his last year of his contract as well. But for this year, I think they should confidently slide into the fourth best team in the Metropolitan Division. The defense, it's definitely better with Jacob Chikrin and Matt Roy. Still highlighted by guys like John Carlson, 2 years left at $8 million. Rasmus Sandin could take a step this year, 24 years old, making 4.6 until 2029. And on the back end, Charlie Lindgren really surprised some people this year. Logan Thompson probably going to be a 1A, 1B combo with Lindgren. That's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the hot hand at what points of the year. So the Capitals should be number 4. Number 5, you could argue this team being number 4, but I think they're right around equal with each other, and that is the New York Islanders. Some places where the Capitals lack, the Islanders are stronger and vice versa. In particular, Ilya Sorokin's a top 5 goalie in the NHL. He didn't have a great year this year, but you still can't overlook him. $8.25 million until 2032. He, when he's on, is a Vezina contender. If they can get him right, him and Semyon Varlamov are arguably the best goalie combo in the league. If not, probably second best. I think them and the Rangers are definitely 1-2 in that aspect. But looking at this team, this forward core, it's not bad. Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat, Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, JG Pageau. They brought in Anthony Duclair as well. Definitely not a bad forward core, but it definitely lacks that star guy. You've got a good number of 50, 60, 65, in Barzal's case, 70-point guys, but they don't really have the high-end player that could really help this team. And on the back end, it's decent. Ryan Pollock and Adam Pelech, I'm big fans of them. Noah Dobson as well as a stud. The Scott Mayfield contract isn't great. You're waiting to see if you can get a little bit more out of Alexander Romanov, who you gave up a first-round pick for as well. But this team is really, I'm surprised they did as well as they did last year. Honestly, they were nearly a 100-point team. They fired Lane Lambert, brought in Patrick Waugh in the second half of the year. Obviously, he got a little bit more out of them, but I definitely think they overachieved that mark a little bit. I think this team's definitely, a low to mid 90-point team. They're a borderline team, whether or not they could make or miss the playoffs. I will tell you now, I don't think this Metropolitan is getting 5 teams into the playoffs. Looking at the Atlantic, where you've got the Bruins, the Lightning, the Maple Leafs, the Panthers, obviously, who just won the Cup, and teams like Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit still trying to break through. I think there's too much competition to try to get 5 teams from the Metropolitan end. It's probably going to be 4-4 if I had to guess this year. So the Islanders and the Capitals are going to be right on that bubble, see if they can get a couple more points and make their way in. But I have the Islanders at number 5. Number 6, talk about a fall from grace, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins, who, if I had to guess, I don't have that in front of me. I would have to imagine they're probably the oldest team in the league. Not a lot of moves for them in the offseason. One of the big ones was getting Kevin Hayes along with a second-round pick from the Blues in exchange for future considerations. He is going to fit into that middle six as a center. Matt Grzelcyk, they also brought in Anthony Beauvillier for the bottom six as well. I like Anthony Beauvillier. He's definitely not what he was when he was on the Islanders. He had a really promising couple of first years when the Islanders were making the conference finals. Seems like he's lost a little bit of his luster since getting traded in the Bo Horvat deal. But you definitely can't write off a team that has Sidney Crosby on it. He was sensational last year, nearly 100 points, really was trying to will that team back into playoff contention. He's got one more year of his contract at $8.7 million. I would be hard-pressed to imagine Crosby wearing a different jersey. I think the Penguins are going to get him re-signed probably to 3 more years, and he will retire as a Penguin like he should. Evgeny Malkin's still here. He's definitely not what he used to be, but still a pretty solid player. Brian Rust here as well. Rickard Rakell, pretty solid contract, $5 million until 2028. I like Rakell. I think he's a very solid player. I can't help but feel like he could be able to produce a little bit more than he does, but definitely been a good contributor for the Penguins. On the back end, Erik Karlsson came in last year. He wasn't bad. He definitely wasn't what he was when he won the Vezina with the Sharks in 23. He's not going to put up 100 points again, but he can carry that first power play unit. Chris Letang is definitely getting up there in age, and beyond that, not the best blue line. Ryan Gray's making $4.5 million until 2029. Not exactly an ideal situation for the Penguins. And in net, Tristan Jarry has his ups and downs. I think he's a pretty solid goalie. 5.375 is definitely not a bad contract. I like Alex Nedeljkovic as a backup as well. I think that's a very consistent and reliable 1-2 combo in net, but I just don't think that the Penguins have the horses to compete in the Eastern Conference like they once did. I think we're finally seeing the end of the road for the Penguins. They've missed the playoffs the last 2 years, and looking at the landscape of the Eastern Conference, I think it's going to be 3 straight years with no playoffs for the Pittsburgh Penguins. At the 7th spot, I've got the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, the Flyers definitely overachieved a bit last year. They're still in the middle of a rebuild, make no mistake about it, but they really had a solid start at the beginning of the year. Fell off at the end, ended up missing the playoffs by a couple points, but it was definitely pretty promising if you're a fan of the Flyers. However, it's hard to feel like that was a good year. There was a lot of turmoil behind the scenes that held this team back. One was the Cutter Gauthier situation. Gauthier was taken 5th overall a couple years ago. Looks like a potential stud, was really tearing it up for the U.S. and the World Juniors, but was not willing to sign in Philadelphia. In turn, he gets traded to the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks trade away Jamie Drysdale, a really solid right-handed defenseman, which is a hot commodity in the NHL, as well as a second-round pick. Definitely a pretty good return for Philly, but it's a frustrating situation for a young player to not be willing to sign with you. I don't know what the circumstances are with that, but definitely a tough situation. Also, the Carter Hart situation as well. He was found to be involved in the Canadian national team scandal. Philadelphia rescinded his rights. He will not play for the Flyers again. There's a good chance him and the other 4 players that are charged in that situation will not play in the NHL again. So definitely a tough break for the Flyers. But the Flyers are still trying to stay competitive. They re-signed Travis Konechny recently to an 8-year deal. I like Konechny, the player. He's got one more year at 5.5. That'll take him to his age 28 season, and after that, he'll be making $8.75 million until he's 36. Good player. I don't see that contract aging very well. He plays a very physical style, so we'll see how that one plays out. Owen Tippett, I thought, had a great year this year. He's really emerging as a really solid player for the Flyers on the right wing. Make it $6.2 million until 2032. That's a really good contract in my eyes, especially considering Tippett is only 25 years old. Sean Couturier, still the leader of this team, making $7.75 million until 2030. I don't love that contract. Couturier is 31 years old, kind of another guy like Konechny. You know, Philly's obviously got a brand. They're a really physical, tough, blue-collar type of team, and they play like that. Make no mistake about it. So, going to be interesting to see if he's able to find a little bit of that 2018-ish form. That would be really nice to find if you're a Flyers fan. Not a lot going on. Not a very promising middle six. Guys like Garnet Hathaway, Morgan Frost, Nick Delorier, Scott Lawton. Not bad players by any means, but given how the rest of the division, rest of the conference is looking, they definitely lack a little bit in that regard. And on the back end, I don't love their back end. Highlighted by Ryan Ellis is on the IR. He's probably never going to play again. You're led by guys like Travis Sanheim making 6.25. Nearly got traded to the Blues in the Torrey Krug trade. Krug nixed that trade. Sanheim in turn did not end up with the Blues. He is still a Flyer. You have guys like Rasmus Ristolainen on a pretty rough contract, $5.1 million. Nick Seeler, a 31-year-old left shot defenseman making 2.7. Jamie Drysdale is one of the bigger hopes for this team, like I said. You also have Eric Johnson and Mark Stahl, some pretty good veteran presence, but definitely not everyday players at this point in their careers. And in terms of goalies, like I said, you lose Carter Hart in that scandal. You're now left with a duo of Ivan Fedotov, 27-year-old, making 3.275, and Samuel Ersson, who I like, had a pretty good year last year, but compared to Hart and probably Ersson, definitely a step back for Flyers fans. Leaves me wondering what the future is for John Tortorella. I thought Tortorella did a great job this past year, even getting them in the playoff conversation. I like Tortorella. He's a good coach. He's a perfect coach for Philly. But if this team takes a step back and is around a 500-point, 82-point team, you wonder if Philly is going to try to make a change for the future. But I don't see the Flyers being in playoff conversation this year. I think they will finish 7th. And the team that I believe will finish 8th this year in the Metro Division is a team that finished 8th last year, that being the Columbus Blue Jackets. I like the Blue Jackets. I live in Columbus. They're an easy team to root for. They have a lot of good young pieces, but they're just not there. They're not close to being there yet. Like I said, their future is pretty bright. A couple additions or a couple of re-signings. They re-signed Kirill Marchenko to a $3.85 million cap hit for the next 3 years. I like that move a lot. Marchenko is a very solid player. He should make that a really good contract. Kent Johnson, 1.8 for the next 3 years as well. The Columbus, they really do have a lot of good young forwards. Johnson, Marchenko, Yegor Shinnikov is another solid young player. Adam Fantilli is definitely the future of that team. 19 years old, 3rd overall pick last year. Definitely showed promise. Hope to see a little bit more progression in his sophomore year. Hopefully they give him better minutes. He was playing a little bit bottom 6 last year, which doesn't really fit his play style. He should be first, second line center, playing 15, 16, 17 minutes a night at minimum. I really like Fantilli's future. And they also brought in Caden Lindstrom. Going to be interesting to see if he's able to make the team. Will he start the season with the Jackets? How will he adapt to the NHL early on in his career? Cole Sillinger, also a young player, 21 years old, currently a restricted free agent, has not been signed yet. On the back end, I like Zach Werenski. I think his contract is a bit rich, but he's a very solid defenseman, 27 years old, making $9.583 million until 2028. That's 4 more years. Damon Severson, they got from New Jersey. I don't love that contract as much, $6.25 million until 2031. More of an offensive defenseman. That's not a great deal. Ivan Provorov, another offensive defenseman, making $4.725 for another year. Eric Branson making $4 million. That's not a great contract. David Jiricek is a good young defenseman, brother of Adam Jiricek, who the Blues drafted a couple weeks back. He's got 2 years left of his ELC. I hope to see some progression from him, maybe work his way up into that top 4. And on the back end, Elvis Merzlikins. He requested a trade last year. He is still here. That is a rough goalie situation for the Jackets. Elvis Merzlikins, who I like, and Daniil Tarasov. Obviously, Merzlikins had his moments a couple years ago, but he's really struggled in the past couple years. They weren't able to trade him. I was wondering if they were going to try to make a move for a guy like Linus Ullmark, who everyone knew was going to be out of Boston at season's end. He got traded to Ottawa for a former Blue Jacket goalie Eunice Corpusalo, but nothing changed for the Blue Jackets on that end. They did bring in Don Waddell. I'm a big fan of that move. I really like Waddell as a GM. Dean Evison, I think, is a good move as coach. He's really gotten a lot out of young players in the past. Look what he did with Kirill Kaprizov with him breaking into the league. Kirill's a superstar. He knows how to work with young players. I think that's a good fit for this situation. But that's how I have the Metropolitan right now. Rangers, Devils, Hurricanes, Capitals, Islanders, Penguins, Flyers, and Blue Jackets. We will do another division next week on the Harry Loomis Show. We're going to make it a quick episode this week. I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you like this new software. My old software that I was using really wasn't working out for me. I didn't like some of the things that it was doing for the quality of the audio and the editing and things like that. We're just back on Zoom, putting it back in my hands. So hopefully this works out. Thank you guys again for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.
This is the Harry Loomis Show.